G'day you mob, how's it going? Welcome to this episode of Aussie English. This is a special 3-part series, okay? So this is going to be one episode in a 3-part series where I interview my dear friend Marcus Kain. Marcus, or Muzz as I know him, and I went to school together and grew up really good friends. All throughout high school, we hung out a lot, we did music, and we also did a lot of working out and fitness related stuff over the past probably 2 decades or more now. So I decided to get Muzz on the podcast to talk about a few topics, including what he's been doing for me and my weight program, my goals, everything like that. We talk about nutrition and eating disorders in the second episode, which is a sort of specialty that he deals with his clients, helping them overcome things like bulimia. And then in the third one, we talk about social pressures on men in particular to look a certain way. So things like bodybuilding, celebrities, movies, and the use of illicit drugs or steroids. A lot of these drugs aren't necessarily illegal, but there's a sort of shady side to it. So we talk about that as well. Anyway, without any further ado, guys, let's get into today's episode. I give you my strength and conditioning and nutrition coach, Marcus Kain. Let's go. G'day guys, how's it going? Welcome to this episode of Aussie English. This is going to be, it's going to be 3 episodes, isn't it? So we're going to do a series here where we're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk about my weight training program, goals, methods, and just weight training in general, I think, and sort of realistic expectations. We'll cover nutrition and eating disorders, and we'll also go through fake natties, which is, I guess to explain that, that's fake people who pretend to be all natural, but they're not. They're on steroids, on the juice. Celebrity bodies, social media, mental health, and pressure on men and physiques and everything. So anyway, today my guest is a return guest. This is probably podcast 3, 4, and 5 for you, Marcus Kain, who is a professional strength and fitness coach and nutritional specialist as well, right?
Yeah, Pete, thanks for having me, man. I always enjoy our talks.
I know, especially off air. All right, so the first one I wanted to talk about was obviously recently you've come on kind enough to give me some sort of direction as I had sort of fallen off the wagon with my health and fitness. I think we sort of talked about it a little bit in the previous episode, although I think we went sort of just anywhere and everywhere. Did you want to talk a little bit about the kind of program that you've put me on and maybe the nutrition side of it as well, why you decided on certain things, everything like that, just to give people an idea of your expertise and rationale for what I'm currently doing?
Cool. So essentially what Pete is on is a fundamental strength training program where we focus on certain movements like the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, and then accessory movements, so additional exercises in the workout that then support the progression of those primary movements. And in addressing those things, we can really find a great kind of platform and a great starting point to move forward in a really measured way. So if we're able to track how strength is going through movements like the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, we can essentially track our progress and get an idea of how well things are going without always resorting to things like, measuring how big someone is getting or how big Pete is getting through, like shoulder measurements or arm measurements, or because I'm not a huge fan of body measurements. I'd rather use metrics like strength and other things like that aren't quite as subjective. So essentially, we're working on a fundamental strength training program that's based on the squat, the bench, and the deadlift with accessory movements to support strength in those primary lifts.
Can I ask, why are those lifts sort of crucial to strength training? Because I'm sure a lot of people listening will know what the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press is when it comes to weight training, and maybe you can sort of briefly describe each of those movements before you talk about why they're so important. But I'm sure that a lot of listeners, like myself, when I was first in the gym, it wasn't really that I knew much about why they were important movements to do. It was more, this is just what you do, right? You go to the gym and you squat, you bench press, you deadlift. If you're going to even use free weights, right? A lot of people will just go to the machines. So yeah, can we discuss that a little bit?
So essentially, they're the three primary lifts that are used for powerlifting competitions. Like the squat and the deadlift are, our two strongest lower body movements or variations of the squat and the deadlift. Of course, there are variations of deadlift, and like you've got the standard deadlift and a sumo deadlift and all those kind of things, and then different variations of squat. But essentially, the squat and the deadlift are our two strongest lower body movements where we can generate the most force, generate the most power. So they're really good ones to measure or to keep track of as far as measuring the progression of full body strength. And then as far as the bench press is concerned, it's one of the strongest movements that we have, that kind of forward pushing movement in the upper body. And it's super measurable. It's a measure of how much force we can apply. Someone could easily argue that we can apply more force in pulling directions. So say with a really intense, maybe like a weighted pull-up or something like that, we might be able to apply more force using muscles in the posterior chain, which is the muscles in our back. However, those are kind of covered in one way or another during things like the deadlift. So the deadlift is essentially a pulling motion, while the bench press is a pushing motion, and it's kind of our strongest upper body push that we can do, where we can apply the most force, push the most weight, and do it in a way that is measurable and trackable. And again, use it in something like a powerlifting competition.
How did the deadlift get its name?
Well, essentially, we're lifting a dead weight off the ground. Like, if someone was to do a variation where the weight doesn't quite touch the ground and you just go, almost to the ground and then come back up, that's a different variation. Part of the deadlift is lifting a weight from the ground that's literally a dead weight. It's there, it's not moving. There might be someone listening to this who's, an absolute powerlifting guru who has a different answer. So don't take my word for it. It's just, that's pretty much what we're looking at. But anyone who has a different definition or some more history or a higher level of education in regards to why that was named what it is, please pipe up, let me know. But yeah, essentially we're lifting a dead weight from the floor.
So how long have we as in, I guess, the fitness industry and people in general who work out, how long have we been focusing on those three lifts? Is that the kind of thing that's been happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years? Or is it a relatively recent practice of putting these lifts into a program for individuals that they've sort of just realized, okay, we can condense down a lot of all these other movements that we would do, and we can just do these three to get the bulk of the results?
Well, it's definitely not a recent thing, but things like this come in and out of fashion. Right. So powerlifting and really working on those three lifts over the last 10, probably even less, like 5 to, it's just become really fashionable again. Those things have always existed in one way or another, especially in the last century. But the degree to which we're hearing about those now in kind of popular training culture and commercial gym culture, if that's what we want to call it, we're just seeing more of them now. And, CrossFit has contributed to that, like, bringing certain movements like this back into kind of fashion, if you will. But yeah, it's a fashionable thing. Like in the 70s, everyone was bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. Everyone was doing the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, the bodybuilding sets. Like a lot more people using machines, and people still use machines now and everything like that. But training and the way that we look at it, the same fundamental principles just get applied again and again and again with an emphasis on different things that seems to come with different fashions and trends, like the functional training movement that really took hold a number of years ago, where people started doing all this really weird shit. And so, and yeah, like, and
well, the funny thing, I saw something recently about that where they were like, the definition of functional training is like you're doing a movement that is targeting multiple muscles, right? And quite a lot of the time you have to obviously stabilize your body when you're doing that. But for some reason, using things like barbells, where you've got weights on either end and you're using usually both hands, obviously, on the barbell to control it, is considered non-functional. And the person was saying, well, that's just stupid because you're still having to use all these other stabilizing muscles. So it is all strength training is functional strength training, or it's, it has a function.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a true functional movement specialist, one of my mentors actually would look at something like the bench press and say, how often do you apply pressure to something in a pushing motion while having like a wall or something supporting your back?
Yeah.
So he's like, the only way that's a functional movement is if you're getting stuff done around the house and your wardrobe falls on you and you have to push it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, I don't necessarily agree. I think the bench press is a great tool and a great movement. But, that's just where those guys are coming from. They look at the way we move in everyday life and they kind of go, how often does this happen?
But if that was true, so you would sort of say, okay, well, I better practice sitting and lying quite a lot because I do that for most of the day.
But we already practice so much of that anyway.
Exactly.
So,
I'll just do it underweight, right? I'll just put a weight on my chest and lie down.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, what are the benefits of doing, say, machine workouts versus free weight workouts? Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you may choose one over the other?
Well, there's essentially a time and a place for everything, except exercises where you attach like 50 bands to yourself. But like
49 is fine.
There's a time and a place for everything. If someone does just machine based workouts, then sometimes that strength doesn't really translate into full body movements where we're standing on our feet and actually moving that well. They might get some hypertrophy and muscular development, but the strength doesn't translate into anything functionally or athletically quite as well as if we were to do things like, the deadlift or certain other movements. But then as well, if we don't leave things like machines and more isolation-based exercises as options on the table, then doing everything in your training program with a barbell can I swear?
Yeah, go. Maybe don't drop the C-bomb, but everything else is fine.
I was just going to say, if you can do a really effective workout with just a barbell.
Yep.
But, doing a workout with nothing but a bar will burn you the fuck out. Like, the impact that the Olympic bar has on the body, it's a very unforgiving piece of equipment.
Yeah.
It's great for building strength, but, for true optimal progression, you want to be able to use that tool like the bar and free weights for what they're good for, but stop at that point of maximum recoverable volume. And what I mean by that is the most work that you can do with that piece of equipment and then positively recover from.
Yeah.
So, and then where machines or isolation exercises might come in handy is, say that I'm looking at someone's deadlift and the way that they're moving shows that there is a weakness in maybe specifically their hamstrings. There's a part of the movement that shows me that, okay, their hamstrings need more work. That's when we could do our sets with the deadlift, we could do our deadlift work and then do extra work on just the hamstrings using a machine. So that really is one of the most effective ways to utilize machines. If we look at the way that someone is moving through their larger movements, like what we might call their primary lift.
Yep.
And then go, okay, where's the weakest link in that chain? what needs work.
Mhm.
We can then go away and do extra work using something like a machine or a band or whatever it might be, while having a lower impact on the central nervous system and a lower impact on the body than if we were to try and just do more work on that just using the bar. So that's how we can just fit more into a session without taxing the body more than we actually need to in order to recover fully. Because maximum recoverable volume is something that not a lot of people are thinking about when they go into the gym.
Can you describe what that is for listeners who may not know?
Yeah, that's essentially the amount of physical work, the amount of mechanical work that our body can perform and then positively recover from.
Before the next time you work out, or just in general?
Yeah, just in both, really.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like if you hit a max effort session, and for like a max effort session be a very heavy session where you're lifting above 80% of your 1 rep max, you hit a max effort session for something like a deadlift on Monday, there's going to be a certain number of days before you can do that again and recover optimally and then train in a way that's beneficial again.
Yeah.
So, and most people, I talk to people every day. People message me every day and they are overshooting their maximum recoverable volume. So the amount of work that they can positively recover from, and then getting really frustrated as to why they're not progressing.
This is the less is more sort of expression, right? Or the idea where you need to find that really perfect zone, the Goldilocks zone, where you can work, as hard as you can, but have the capacity to recover and then work as hard as you can the next time. Whereas if you go past it, you're either going to have a suboptimal training session next time, or you're not going to be able to train next time because you're ruined.
Yeah. And for some people who are really strong-willed and really disciplined and just really strong mentally, they can push themselves to do way more than their body can actually optimally recover from. And because of that fitness industry culture of like, bigger, harder, faster, more, work harder.
Be resilient.
People who are really strong mentally will just keep pushing.
This is where I kind of have a bit of an issue with David Goggins. At times I've heard him speak a bit. He's that US Navy SEAL. I think he was a Navy SEAL, and he lost all this weight and became, a freak, but he's just always pushing that message, which is grind harder, do more. How many push-ups can you do? One more than you, mate. Like without the Australian mate.
Well,
but and it's like there's a good message in there, but there's also a bit of a bad message in there.
I think with that, we need to be a bit sensitive to the audience, like that people are talking to. So the way that I got called out on this the other day. Someone accused me of, but something in your post didn't apply to these people, or what about these people?
Yeah.
And I actually said, well, I would hope that anyone reading this content would forgive me for my limitations in regards to what happens when I speak to a very specific audience about a very specific problem. That same advice won't apply to everybody. And that's something that can be really, really difficult in giving this advice. So someone like is it David?
David Goggins,
you mentioned?
Yeah.
Yes. Someone like David, his primary audience, the people who he's talking to, might need a kick in the ass. They might need that kind of inspiration. They might need that push. Whereas someone else listening to that same message might already be overtraining and think, oh God, I got to do more and just go more. So it really, the responsibility is on each and every one of us individually to be as educated as possible and to be as self-aware as possible when doing any of this.
Yeah.
And because anyone giving any kind of message of self-improvement is speaking to a certain audience and a certain kind of person.
I always get sort of sick of and wary of people who give just sort of blanket statements that as you say, it's obvious when you break it down that it doesn't apply to everyone equally, but that it gets presented in such a way like that where, it's just like it needs a bit more nuance. I think that's the thing.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, but if we all understood the principle of maximum recoverable volume, that's almost all we would need in order to be able to look at any statement or any generalized statement given by any fitness or personal development professional and know whether or not it applies to us. So yeah, sure, there should definitely be some clarification, but I definitely understand how hard it is to put a message out there and to, really make your people feel heard and feel listened to and feel identified and validated, while also covering all bases for everyone else at the same time. Yeah. So it's a combination of, yeah, sure, every now and then we should just clarify, look, this is the context in which I mean this, but at the same time, everyone, especially with training and nutrition, if they're going to go on any kind of journey with training and nutrition,
sorry, I'm going to be that guy.
That's all right. That's a hell of a water bottle. Yeah, with any kind of journey with training and nutrition, just needs to stay educated on a few fundamental strength and conditioning principles. And this doesn't mean like the latest bullshit fucking fad that some influencer is selling. No, I mean clinical strength and conditioning principles like maximum recoverable volume. If we take that approach and everyone takes a little bit of accountability, then we're all going to have a better ride.
I want to cover that a little bit about how people can learn about strength and conditioning, whether it's from scratch or even, similar to me where they fall off the wagon, they know a little bit, but they really don't know that much and they want to get back into it and really be effective. But before that, with these large compound lifts that we were talking about, say the squat and the deadlift, there seems to be a lot of taboo around them. Not taboo, but like fear, I think. That was one of the things I was always afraid of, especially heavyweight when I was training. I always did deadlifts incorrectly now when I look back, and squats incorrectly now when I look back, and I'm glad I didn't go too heavy. But do you think that the fear is justified and that people should kind of, be afraid of the deadlift and squat and not use it? Or do you think that it's just a matter of educating yourself sufficiently to be able to do so safely and that anyone can do it safely with the right education?
Yeah. Well, the risk to reward ratio with movements like the deadlift especially is pretty high, to be honest. So we all need to make a choice when it comes to our training with how much we want to, how dedicated we want to be to really learning the art and the science of certain movements. How much time and energy are we willing to dedicate to really getting that under control and learning it like we would learn a skill?
Yeah.
Because if we just want to go to the gym and throw weights around and exercise, like the difference between training and exercise, training has a specific goal and a specific purpose. Exercise is just movement. Like if we want specific goals, then we need to train. If we want to train, then we need to learn the skills necessary to train. That's not necessarily meaning that training is right and exercise is wrong. It's like whatever's right for you is going to be right for you, and it's up to you personally. But the reason why that things like the deadlift have such a bad name in some circles is because inexperienced personal trainers and inexperienced gym instructors coach these movements badly, and then people get hurt doing them. And then we say, oh, the deadlift is bad. Or, there's no regulations like on YouTube, for example, for if you put up a shit deadlift demo.
Yeah.
I don't know, if you put up a shit tutorial or a shit demo of something, people can watch that and go, okay, cool, that's how I do it. And they don't know any better. Someone
usually
who we assume,
young boys as well, right? Teenage boys are going to be the one that are probably the largest part of that audience. And you're like, if they're going to be set up to injure themselves at such a young age, like, yeah, it blows my mind. I was watching a few of those videos that we were sharing to one another about people effectively breaking down other people's channels and just saying, you guys are teaching horrible technique. You need to educate yourselves effectively. And, just the response that you would get back from those YouTube creators was effectively just complete denial and that you're just a hater. And it's like, no, your videos are getting millions of views and you're educating people incorrectly who are going to then end up injuring themselves significantly and probably not be able to do weights for very long. So you have a massive responsibility as an influencer, to influence correctly, right?
Absolutely. The difficult thing there is that none of us really understand the danger in a lot of ways until we experience an intense injury. So from the perspective of someone who might be in their early to mid 20s, their natural level of human growth hormone is still really high.
Those were the days.
They've still got that kind of youthful bounce about them. They recover from things better. They don't get hurt as easily. They don't get injured as easily. From their perspective, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, sure, they need to get their fucking shit together and learn how to coach properly, not just watch another goddamn YouTube video and then go, okay, I know how to coach this now. Like I used to coach boxing, not because and I put work into learning how to coach boxing properly. I didn't just, whereas other people are just like
put gloves on and I was just like, let's do this. I'm your coach.
Yeah. Just like watching a YouTube video and then going, okay, let's go do this now. And people do the same thing with deadlifts. However, until someone experiences an injury for themselves, they don't usually realize how wrong they're doing something. And and this is like the catch-22, the thing that makes it difficult. It's very difficult for someone who's been getting away with training a certain way just because of youth, to feel anything but pissed off when someone says, hey, you're doing a shit job. And they're like, well, it hasn't caused a single problem for me yet, so fuck you.
I'm getting mad gains, son. I'm getting mad gains. And you're like, yeah, but you could tweak it and improve things, right? And be safer. Yeah, it is that wisdom versus knowledge thing, I think, with youth and the older I get, the more hair I lose. I think it's the more I realize, ooh, I did not know as much as I thought I knew 10 years ago.
Yeah. To be honest, even when I think of I've always been a very cautious trainer. Even when I'm strength and conditioning coach now, but when I was and nutrition and whatever, but when I was just the personal trainer, in my mid-20s, I was always very cautious, always very aware of injuries and everything like that. I was the guy that was given, the very difficult cases to work with, people who, older clientele, people who've experienced injuries. I just kind of fell into that role. But still, I look back at some of the techniques and some of the things that I was coaching other people and think, oof, yeah, that could have been better. Even for someone like me who always was on the conservative side, there was still things I could improve. And I only see that now. So, we do the best we can with what we have to work with. But still, that doesn't remove accountability.
Yeah. So should people be ultimately afraid of the deadlift or the squat? Or it's just that they should educate themselves effectively?
Absolutely not. They should not be afraid. If it's taught by the right person in the right way, there is nothing to be afraid of. Of course, when it comes to differences in the way that we're all put together, everyone's body is slightly different. For example, the femur, the bone in our thigh, some people have longer femurs than other people in comparison to the length of, say, the tibia and fibula, in their shin. So depending on our dimensions, we're all going to be slightly better at other movements, not so good at others. there might be some people who just, it's not a good idea for them to do, say, a traditional deadlift where they're lifting the bar off the floor because, you know, they might be super tall. They might, you know, that's not to say that tall people shouldn't deadlift, but if something is going on physiologically or biomechanically, whatever we want to call it, that makes it not safe for someone to do a specific movement, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that person. It just means that we need to adapt that movement to be safe.
Yep.
So this is where generic information starts to fall flat on its ass. Because if you're going to be doing squats and deadlifts and those higher risk movements, you need personalized coaching from someone who's super informed.
So it's one of those things where it's, you know, respect it. Respect it, but don't fear it. You should respect it enough to actually get taught properly and have someone give you one-on-one kind of coaching, as opposed to just, I'll look up a YouTube video and then go to the gym tomorrow and just slap on as much weight as I can possibly do.
Yeah. And something that I've noticed over the last year with COVID and lockdowns and everything like that, it is exceptionally difficult to teach a movement like a deadlift via video content.
Mm-hmm.
It is really like when I was working in gyms and being on the gym floor with people, I would spend hours working on people's deadlift. The attention that I would pay to someone's deadlift and with them right there, one-on-one, watching so attentively and tweaking every little thing, I would spend hours on that. And then to try and coach and deliver that same quality of information and that same, to try and deliver that same thing through videos where you just kind of shoot video content as best you can and then hope that someone understands what you mean. Like, oh God.
Well, this has been the hard thing with you and me, right? I've had to blast you with so many questions and I've had to film pretty much every set that I've ever done now with you with squatting and deadlifts and send them to you and be like, am I fucking it up? Am I doing anything wrong? Is this okay?
But that's how it should be done.
Yeah.
Any kind of distance coaching, the only way to do it is you have to film yourself doing these movements again and again and again and send it to your coach so that they can take screenshots and draw little arrows and go, look at this, do that, whatever. And that's just really the only way to do it. So if you're working with a coach who sends you a video and goes, all right, do it like this, and then seems to just assume that they've done their job and you know how to do it now, and they're a shit fucking coach.
Doesn't check up and follow it and make sure that your technique isn't getting bad or getting rusty or changing or...
Yeah.
Far out. Well, getting on to, I guess, my training, let's talk a little bit about what you've done for me and sort of the way in which you've done it, right? So I came to you and I just said, you know, we were just having a discussion, I guess, about getting back into shape. Me, you're already in shape. What was the sort of, how do you sort of address that sort of thing where you come across someone like myself who's been off the wagon for probably 3 or 4 years and hasn't been training significantly? What can someone in that sort of a position expect to hear from someone who, you know, is like yourself?
Well, first there's going to be a lot of questions. Like, you know, if you go to a coach or you go to a trainer and they speak at you more than they ask questions, that's a huge fucking red flag.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't a whole lot of that going on with you and I because we've known each other for a very long time. We've always talked about training and exercise and everything like that, and I'm relatively familiar with your history. But there should be a lot of questions.
If it was someone that walked in off the street, you would be blasting them a lot more with, you know, tell me about what you've done in the past, tell me about your diet, tell me about everything else.
And this is where, like, because I coach primarily nutrition now, and primarily pathways out of binge eating disorders and things that come from excessive dieting and hang-ups around food. Like, that's essentially what I coach primarily now.
And we'll get into that in the next episode, guys.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. But when it comes to, you know, people often think I'm weird when they come to me for strength and conditioning coaching or whatever, because I'm like, I'm asking 1,000 questions. I'm asking them to send me videos. And what people usually expect is someone to just go, all right, here's your PDF with your program. Here's the couple of like videos. Now go do that.
Yeah.
Like, but there really should be more questions to get an idea of whether or not
want to tailor it to your specific needs, right? And that was the thing. I think you were saying, do you want to be strong? Do you want to be ripped? Or do you want to look good? Because it tends to be, I think you can have two of those, but not all of them, right? I think I probably butchered that, but you...
Well, you can hit all of it. This is where things like, conjugate and concurrent programs, training programs come into play, working on different skills. And I was chatting with a friend of mine who manages a gym in Melbourne, about the difference between conjugate and concurrent training programs the other day, which is pretty advanced strength and conditioning principles.
We're getting in the deep end.
No, but there are some people that are still debating on the difference between those two. Something in regards to strength and conditioning is just sometimes it gets complicated and there are a lot of gray areas. But can you remind me of the question, because I forgot it?
But I was saying, yeah. So when I came to you, you were like, "Well, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve?
Yeah,
what do you want to do?"
What are the goals? I think depending on where you are in your fitness journey, there needs to be there can be a more generalized approach if it's your first couple of years of training. But as you get past the beginner and as you get into the intermediate phase, and you don't reach the intermediate phase of training until you've been training for like a couple of years at least. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. A lot of people think that, I can do a couple of gym-based movements now or whatever. I've been training for 6 months. Surely I'm not a beginner anymore. But as rough as this is to hear sometimes, unless you've been training for a couple of years, then in a lot of ways, physiologically, we're still going to be in those initial 2 years of adaptation. So we're still going to be a beginner. And to be honest, that's not a really sexy thing to hear. That's hard to sell because people hear that and go, fuck you.
I'm going to find the guy who can give me a result in 3 weeks.
Yes. I want someone to tell me that I'm awesome right now. And yes, of course, you are awesome in different ways, but we need to...
He's talking to me, guys, not you.
I'm sure everyone listening to this is a wonderful human being. But yeah, so this is where you can get away with a relatively generalized approach. Medium level rep ranges, your 8 to 10 to 15 rep ranges on different movements, working on your fundamental, like big lifts, like your bench, deadlift, squat, pull-up variations, row variations, maybe an overhead press, all those just really meat and potatoes style things. And you can really perfect those and work on those for a couple of years.
Yep.
Just using moderate rep ranges before you need to get too specific. And again,
in that time, sorry to interrupt you, but in that time, you're probably going to work out what you want to do as well, right? And get a better knowledge of how the training works and what it's going to achieve, how your body acts. And so you shouldn't be in a rush, to do one thing or the other and it's the hardest thing to say, right? It's like with learning any kind of task like that or skill, like with learning a language, right? You don't necessarily want to be like, all I want to learn is how to talk about Lord of the Rings in English. That's the only thing I want, because it's like pretty certain it's going to end up being, completely different from that in the end. So you want to just take it easy, get in there, find what you like, and then, see how you go after a few years.
Yeah. Well, there's Ross Edgley actually talks about the value of general physical preparedness quite a lot. It's one of the topics that he really talks about a lot, that I'm super glad that someone in his position, with that kind of following is really, really putting out there like quite a bit. And the whole thing with general physical preparedness is that it's generalized. It's like, those first number of years of training, like there's push, pull, lift, throw, even stuff like sled pulls, sled pushes, pull-ups, a deadlift-based movement. Like, it's just really big, simple movements that build overall conditioning and build that physical preparedness that then gets you to the point of then going, all right, now where do I want to specialize? Because our level of general physical preparedness often, or it just has a huge impact on how far we can go with, the other areas of our training. So sometimes we might think like, this generalized stuff, I want to work specifically on what I want to work on, but our degree of general physical preparedness, our work capacity, our work capacity is like, the amount of mechanical work that we can perform. That all matters.
And it takes time to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not, we're not just looking at strength and muscle size here. We're looking at things like connective tissues, like, tendons and ligaments, the strength of connective tissue in the body. We're looking at things like central nervous system adaptation.
Yep.
So all those kind of things that provide the foundation for you to then be amazing at whatever you choose to progress to.
I think to bring it back, we'll sort of finish up here, but to bring it back to language, my view of that is sort of like, for the first few months, years, you want to work on just basic English so that you have a really strong base and platform to then launch off into, okay, if you decide, okay, I'm going to become a nurse or a doctor or something, then I'm going to have to focus just on medical English. It's like you need to get all the basic stuff out of the way and have a really good solid foundation in vocab and grammar and all of that stuff so that then you can throw yourself into the deeper end with the more complicated areas or more specific areas.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the same principles apply with basically everything, strength and conditioning and body goals and however we want to talk about it, same principles apply. There's like a fundamental base of support that just, if we do that right, it makes the rest of the journey so much easier, and so much more pleasurable, so much more enjoyable. Whereas if we skip that, if we try and cut corners, and some people will try and sell you programs or sell you services, saying that they do have shortcuts or they do have a hack or they do have something. There are no fucking hacks. There are no shortcuts. If someone tells you they have a shortcut, they're a fucking prick.
Well, and it's one of those things that it's like, this is not just fitness where this applies. This is not just learning English either. Anyone, anywhere who's trying to tell you that you can learn an incredibly complicated skill in a very short period of time should definitely get your eyebrows to lift, right? Like you should definitely be a bit, how to become a surgeon in 3 months. That's the same thing with the how to become fluent in, 30 days. And it's just the annoying thing about that is that, it gets the eyeballs, it gets the attention, it gets the money because a lot of people are selling programs that are, like the 30 days from 0 to 100 in English or in French or whatever it is. But the real message there that I think, we're missing out, and maybe we can talk a bit about this in the episode about fake natties and the fitness industry. But the message is it sets people up to fail because it inherently avoids emphasizing hard work that is continued and that you can maintain over a long period of time, and to expect that that's what's going to be required and that the results aren't going to come easily, right? So, it's one of those annoying things that seems to be everywhere. And this is so relative now to social media and our attention spans just shortening more and more and more and wanting instant gratification as opposed to having to delay it.
Yeah. Though I do want to add to that, just as like a kind of final word about this, working on the fundamentals that I'm talking about, like that general physical preparedness, we might be able to really kind of milk benefits out of what we might call the beginner phase for a couple of years. But that doesn't mean that it's going to take a couple of years to see fucking great results.
Bingo.
Right? So let's be absolutely sure of that. You're going to see results within the first 6 months.
Yep. And that's the same with languages, right?
Like,
the most amount of results you're going to see and the biggest like the steepest gradient of change is going to be that initial, what is it, like the initial first 20 hours. I think I've seen a lecture about that where they say, you know, the first 20 hours is where you're going to pretty much get the biggest gains ever. And it's the same for beginners in fitness. You're going to get insane results in the first 3 to 6 months of lifting.
Yeah.
But then it starts tapering off and you have to work harder and get smarter.
Yeah, insane results, but at the same time, we're going to address that a little bit more in the upcoming podcast about steroid use and performance enhancing drugs and what you can really expect.
Yeah.
From your first 6 months of honest training.
All right, Muzz, where can people find out more about you and what you do and potentially get your services if they need it?
Come and visit me on Instagram, mkain coaching. And that's definitely the best place to come and see me right now. I'm pretty much always on Instagram. That's where to find me. That's where to talk to me.
How do you spell it? Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Mkain is spelled Mkain, and then coaching, as you would spell coaching. So yeah, that's definitely the best place to come and find me.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.
Thanks, guys. See ya.